brainstorm a list of 10 commandments for self-disclosure. In other words, I would like you to address issues of responsibility, appropriateness, civility, goodwill, the list goes on. So for example, in your list, you might say one of your 10 commandments is don't talk politics. Okay. Now, if you want to take that further, you might say don't talk politics on a first date. So maybe your 10 commandments is not necessarily that politics is the issue, but it is depth of the relationship. So if you're in a very new relationship, maybe it's not appropriate to talk politics, but if you've been in a relationship a long time, then politics is not an issue. So I'd like you to brainstorm 10 commandments. So come up with your top 10 rules of self-disclosure and just keep those type of issues in mind: responsibility, being appropriate, being civil, having goodwill, etc. So in your post this week, you can just number them 1 to 10, that's fine. And they don't have to be in 10 order. I mean, Moses didn't say number 1 is more important than number 10. So your 10 commandments can be in any order, but just make sure that they address those issues and that they are your 10 rules of self-disclosure. So if we have self-disclosure over time, meaning there's longevity in the relationship, enhancing intimacy is almost a subcomponent of self-disclosure. So relationship development is based on fairly consistent disclosure patterns. In other words, you can think about a relationship and the way that it changes in context of the disclosure patterns, and I'll explain that a little bit more here. So there are periods of high self-disclosure early in the relationship because initially we share low-risk information fairly rapidly. When you're just getting to know someone, you share a lot about yourself, you ask a lot about the other person, but what is shared is most often low-risk information. In other words, I'm not being very vulnerable, I'm not really revealing anything too personal, but I'm telling you a lot about myself nonetheless. Okay, so then over time, we finally begin to share our more personal disclosures, which then of course means intimacy has been enhanced. Now, if we're thinking in terms of relationship development, in terms of our disclosure patterns, we're going to share a lot about ourselves early in the relationship, but then the amount of information that is disclosed decreases as the relationship becomes more intimate. And I think I asked you way back when, I don't even know what week at this point, but early on in the semester I asked you something along the lines of, is it okay that when you've been in a relationship a long time that you don't talk as much? I think there was an example that research shows that men and women who are married a long time do not speak as much. And some of you shared with me your personal experiences in your marriages or whatever. So obviously, the more you know about someone, the less you disclose about yourself because there's really no need to. Now, that's not to say that you get to a point where you never talk about your thoughts or your feelings or your dreams or your hopes with your spouse again. But it is to say that the level of disclosure is not as high. It's not as frequent. Now, holding back from sharing intimate information signals a reluctance to escalate the relationship. So I want to show that juxtaposition there, because that's not to say if you're in a long-term relationship where you have become intimate with that person, that's not to say that because your amount of disclosure, amount of information has decreased, that you don't want to escalate the relationship. That's not what we're saying at all. But if you have not reached that level of intimacy yet and you are holding back, then that signals a reluctance to escalate the relationship. So I wanted to make that distinction there. Interpersonal relationships cannot achieve intimacy without self-disclosure. Do you agree or disagree with that statement? I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Interpersonal relationships cannot achieve intimacy without self-disclosure. So put up your dukes and tell me what you think and let me know what you're willing to fight about that. Okay, so this is a quote I would like you to consider. The decision to disclose is based on the perceived rewards the person will gain if he or she discloses information. I'll read it again. The decision to disclose is based on the perceived rewards the person will gain if he or she discloses information. So I'm curious as to what rewards they might be referring to, and how would they know? So ponder that. And here's a little case study for you. I try to give you real life scenarios because I want you to have practical applications of this too for your own life, but also for the world at large. So I'm realizing that I use a lot of Hispanic names, but anyway, maybe it's because I speak Spanish, I don't know. Carmelita would like to become better friends with Hector. She decides to disclose some personal information to him, hoping it will increase feelings of intimacy between them. Is it ethical to self-disclose to others as a strategy to enhance intimacy in the relationship? So we're not talking about is it ethical to self-disclose, because I think we would all agree that self-disclosure is usually a positive thing. So, but the issue here is it ethical to self-disclose to others as a strategy to enhance intimacy in the relationship? So you can share your thoughts with me on that. And then finally, it has been said that people are more likely to disclose personal information by email than face-to-face. Why would that be? And I'm just throwing these out there. You can add your own or use these, whatever you think. Maybe because there's issues of directness or confidence or intimidation. So, is one more direct than another? Is one more confident, gives you more confidence than the other? Is one more or less intimidating? So I'm just curious as to what you think. Do you think people are more likely to disclose personal information remotely than face-to-face, and why? So as far as moving forward, this is not really a whole lot related to the chapter, but I wanted to throw this in because I think it's important to consider how intimacy and distance in the world we live in right now is affected by a certain element that I can't talk about until you answer this question. So what is your thought when you think of CMC? What comes to mind? What could that stand for? If you hear the acronym CMC, what do you possibly think that is? And as an aside, one of my very, very good friends, I worked in restaurants for years and years and years before I finished grad school, and one of my very, very good friends that I worked with used to say that he coined the term chronic malcontent, and that was for people that were never happy, and no matter what the situation was, they were always upset and complaining. And so there's a little joke in my family that if someone's in a bad mood, I'll do sign language for CMC, chronic malcontent, but that's not what that means. That was just totally an aside to give you a little humor for the night. So what is CMC? What did you think of? It actually is computer-mediated communication. And you may say, what is that? So computer-mediated communications, the way that we interact via technology. So we may have two goals with computer-mediated communication: to make friends and maintain friends. Especially in the social networking craze, we usually maintain our friendships through that, especially distant relationships where we can't see them frequently. But computer-mediated communications also allow us to make friends. I mean, there are plenty of marriages that have come out of, meeting in a chat room or on eHarmony or whatever. So we are actually able to make friends and establish relationships via computer-mediated communications as well. So there are several types. We can think in terms of synchronous chat rooms, teleconferencing, and IMing. So that is where it's like real time, you're communicating, back and forth rapidly, etc. Then you have asynchronous, which is more of the delayed communication. So email, you post something on a bulletin board or someone's wall, and then you wait for them to read it later. So my question is, do you think one is better than the other as far as communication is concerned? And are there certain situations for each? So would you say that synchronous might be better in one situation, but asynchronous might be better in another? And then what are the challenges that are associated with computer-mediated communications? Because when we're talking about intimacy and distance, obviously, computer-mediated communications provide an alternative to a distance issue. You can be very communicative across the world. I have readers literally from all over the world. My husband just checked the analytics last evening and told me that people literally are reading my website all over the world. And he gave me, you have this many people that read it in Africa, and you have this many people that read it in Australia. And so literally we have contact with people all over the world via the computer, which is fantastic. But, what are the challenges? So we're talking about intimacy and distance. That gives us an alternative to the challenge of distance, but does it create new challenges as far as intimacy goes? So how does writing skill affect computer-mediated communications? What about nonverbals? What about pondering? When, you're pausing to consider something that's been said, if you're not in front of someone, you have no way to know what the silence means or what the delay means. There are fewer cues, so there's more emphasis on what is written. Now, interestingly, you still follow rules of disclosure in computer-mediated communications. There's the potential for deception. The Brad Paisley song, I don't know how many of you are country fans, but I'm self-disclosing that I'm, #1 country fan. I was a fan of country when country wasn't cool. And Brad Paisley, greatest songwriter arguably in the country world, has his song I'm So Much Cooler online. And if you are not a country fan, at least do yourself a favor and go to YouTube and listen to the lyrics and watch the video. So cute. Anyway, but the whole concept is when you are online, the deception factor is so much greater increased, because there's no way to know for sure until you meet them face to face. There's no way to know for sure what they're telling you about them, if it's true or not. So that also provides anonymity, because you can just disappear. If the relationship starts going south, as long as they're not a hacker, stalker, crazy person, you can just never communicate with them again, and basically the relationship disappears. But all of those things have positives and negatives. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about how intimacy and distance is affected by our technology age that we live in. And a few more food for thought questions. Are there rules for using email? And if so, what are they? What might be the benefits of using email for communications? Can relationships be developed by email or maintained by email? And what about using email at work for personal use? So those are some food for thought questions that I want to throw out there, because especially in terms of the technology that we use day in and day out, and how many of our relationships involve technological communication. That's not something that I want to spend a lot of time on, but I do want to at least get that in your brain, get that kind of swirling around in that head about how there are rules and there are regulations and there are expectations, just like we've spent, an entire semester learning about how to be better communicators. Well, that also goes for communicating online, communicating via the computer. So we can't ignore that relationships can be started and developed and maintained and destroyed, and all of those things through computer communication as well. So it's not enough to just know how to communicate face to face. You also have to know how to communicate when you're not face to face, and so that's where this comes in. So think about those 4 questions, answer one, just to kind of give me a feel for what you think. And we are done. So I hope that you have a better understanding of intimacy and distance. I know that was a further development of last week. So just a reminder, those first 4 questions at the beginning, please choose one of them and answer one of those. Then do your top 10 disclosure, 10 commandments, and then answer one of these 4 questions. So 3 things that need to go into your post this week, in addition to your thoughts about either the lecture or the reading. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. We are almost there, so excited about finishing the semester, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye.